The Science of Moral Development is a fascinating exploration based on the work of Lawrence J. Walker and Jeremy A. Freimer. As you can see from the image, which features a balance scale with a gavel and a revolver, we'll be delving into the complex relationship between justice, law enforcement, and morality. This presentation aims to shed light on how our moral reasoning evolves and what science tells us about these important processes. Let's dive in. In this presentation, we'll explore the complex relationship between science and morality. We'll start by examining the subject matter of moral development, followed by an in-depth look at Kohlberg's stage model and the empirical evidence supporting it. Then we'll discuss schemas and the neo-Kohlbergian approach, along with how orientations and gender play a role in moral reasoning. We'll also cover domains of social knowledge and the influence of moral emotions. Later, we'll touch on intuition and dual process theories and look at the roles of personality and identity. Finally, we'll wrap up with conclusions and potential directions for future research. This structure will guide us through the key concepts and current thinking in moral development. On this slide, we explore two central paradoxes at the intersection of science and morality. First, we look at the distinction between descriptive and prescriptive approaches. Psychological science describes how things are. It observes and explains behavior and mental processes, but morality tells us how things ought to be. This raises an important question. How can purely descriptive scientific methods inform moral norms without falling into the naturalistic fallacy, which wrongly assumes that what is natural is automatically what should be? Second, we address the tension between impersonal science and personal morality. Scientific observations are objective and detached, yet moral experiences are deeply personal and subjective. How can science, which studies psychological mechanisms, truly capture the richness of these moral experiences? Psychological science can help by providing insights into the processes behind moral judgment, serving both as a consumer of moral philosophy and as a way to empirically test moral claims. Together, these points highlight the challenges and opportunities in integrating scientific inquiry with moral philosophy, marking key boundaries for this interdisciplinary field. The image alongside reminds us of the human side of morality, the heart, the gift, which science seeks to understand without losing sight of its personal significance. Here, we see three key perspectives on the subject matter of moral development. First, Freud's early psychoanalytic view focused on how emotions are regulated through the superego. He suggested that moral judgment takes a backseat, as defense mechanisms play a larger role in guiding behavior. Moving on to Skinner's behaviorist perspective, he emphasized that moral behavior is shaped entirely by the environment and observable actions, rejecting the importance of internal thoughts or feelings in moral development. Finally, Piaget's cognitive developmental approach highlights how moral judgment evolves alongside cognitive growth, seeing moral behavior as a natural outcome of this mental development. Together, these views show how our understanding of moral development has shifted from isolated explanations towards a more comprehensive approach that recognizes multiple factors at work. Here we see Kohlberg's stage model of moral development, which breaks down how people's moral reasoning evolves through three main levels: preconventional, conventional, and principled. Each level is divided into two stages, making a total of 6 stages that show increasing complexity and deeper philosophical understanding. A key tool Kohlberg used to assess moral reasoning is the moral judgment interview. This method presents participants with moral dilemmas, like the famous Heinz dilemma, where one must decide if stealing a drug to save a life is justified. These scenarios help reveal how individuals reason about right and wrong. Importantly, Kohlberg believed that moral development follows a strict, hierarchical progression. You can't skip stages or move backward. Instead, each stage builds on the previous one, reflecting cognitive growth and more balanced, philosophically sound reasoning. The highest level, principled reasoning, represents the most mature and thoughtful moral judgments. The image here reflects the reflective and thoughtful process involved in Kohlberg's interviews, highlighting the personal engagement and contemplation required to understand moral judgment deeply. Overall, this model helps us see moral development not just as a set of behaviors, but as a structured, evolving way of thinking about ethics. Here, we focus on two important empirical claims from Kohlberg's stage model of moral development. First, Stage consistency means that each stage is psychologically real, and individuals tend to remain consistent within a stage when reasoning about different situations, whether these are hypothetical dilemmas or actual real-life problems. Second, invariant order refers to the idea that moral development follows a strict, irreversible sequence. People move through the stages one at a time without skipping or going backward. This claim is supported by longitudinal studies tracking moral growth over time with very few exceptions. The image of students observing a dissection highlights the scientific approach Kohlberg used, emphasizing the careful, empirical study behind these conclusions. Here we explore REST's defining issues test, which offers a practical way to assess moral judgment without the complexity of Kohlberg's original interview. Instead of open-ended responses, this test uses ratings and rankings to measure how people reason about moral dilemmas efficiently. Central to the neo-Kohlbergian approach are moral schemas, which are deeply rooted frameworks guiding our moral thinking. These schemas focus on personal interest, the importance of maintaining social norms, and a post-conventional perspective that transcends established rules. What's important here is the construct validity. This test reliably captures differences based on age, education, expertise, political views, and even the ability to predict moral behavior. The image on the right shows someone actively engaged in completing such a test, highlighting its role as a structured assessment tool in understanding moral development. On this slide, we explore the idea of moral orientations and gender through two key perspectives. First, Carol Gilligan proposed that women tend to approach morality through an ethic of care, which focuses on relationships and empathy, while men lean more toward an ethic of justice, emphasizing abstract rules and fairness. She argued that traditional moral theories often neglect women's unique moral viewpoints. However, when we look at the scientific evidence, the picture becomes more nuanced. Research shows that people don't consistently rely on just one moral orientation. Most studies find little to no significant gender differences in moral reasoning. Where differences appear, they often result from how studies are designed rather than actual inherent distinctions between men and women. So, rather than seeing moral reasoning as a strict divide between genders, it's more accurate to understand that individuals use a blend of care and justice perspectives. This challenges the notion of strong gender polarity and highlights the importance of considering research methods when interpreting these findings. The image of two people in conversation here nicely reflects this ongoing dialogue and diversity of moral perspectives without reinforcing stereotypes. Here, we explore Turiel's domain theory, which breaks down social knowledge into three key areas: moral, conventional, and personal domains. Young children are able to distinguish these domains quite clearly. They see rules about justice, rights, and human welfare as universal and independent, unlike social conventions or personal choices that might be more flexible or arbitrary. However, the moral domain is often defined narrowly. Research encourages us to expand this understanding to appreciate the moral dimensions not only in broad social issues, but also in everyday personal decisions and social norms. This broader perspective helps us recognize the full scope of morality in our social lives. Here, we focus on moral emotions, which are crucial in a child's moral development. First, we have self-conscious emotions like guilt and shame. These emotions start to appear in young children as they become aware of social standards and begin to regulate their own behavior. This shows an early sensitivity to right and wrong. On the other hand, there are other-oriented emotions such as empathy and sympathy. These feelings motivate children to care for others and engage in prosocial behavior. They develop from basic emotional responses in infancy and become more sophisticated as children grow and learn to see things from others' perspectives. Together, these emotional experiences lay the groundwork for a child's conscience and moral actions. It's important to remember that parents and a child's temperament also play significant roles in shaping these moral emotions. The image here illustrates the caring interaction that nurtures these essential emotional bonds. Here, we're looking at the concept of dual process theories in moral judgment. On one hand, System 1 operates quickly, automatically, and is driven by emotions. This is our intuition at work. On the other hand, System 2 is slower, more deliberate, and follows logical rules, engaging in careful reasoning. Haidt's social intuitionist model focuses on how our gut feelings often drive moral decisions before we even consciously think about them. Meanwhile, Green's trolley dilemma studies reveal how our brains respond differently when faced with personal versus impersonal moral choices, highlighting the complexity of these processes. The image of the chess pieces and the thoughtful hands symbolizes this strategic mental balancing act between immediate intuition and calculated reasoning, showing how both systems interact as we make moral judgments. Here, we're looking at moral exemplars, those individuals who consistently live by a high moral standard and actively demonstrate both agency and communion in their behavior. Agency refers to self-directed actions and personal initiative, while communion involves connection and care for others. The reconciliation model suggests that true moral maturity comes from integrating these two aspects into a cohesive identity. This integrated moral identity motivates people to act in ways that not only benefit themselves, but also enhance the well-being of others. Essentially, it's this blend of self-interest and genuine concern for others that underpins proactive moral behavior. The image on the right, showing a communal dining scene, subtly reflects this idea of connection and shared responsibility in a community setting. As we come to the conclusion, the key takeaway is that moral philosophy and psychological science have great potential to enrich each other. However, before we can fully integrate these fields, it's crucial to carefully differentiate between the main theories we have. This chapter emphasizes that thoughtful separation is an important step toward meaningful collaboration. Looking ahead, there are several exciting directions for future research. These include a deeper exploration of moral intuition and how it interacts with reasoning, understanding how moral thinking develops over time, and how personal goals align or conflict with moral goals. Altogether, this sets the stage for new questions and challenges that will help advance our understanding in both disciplines.